Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and my next Catching Up with BookTube video. If you haven't caught this series before, what I'm doing is reading some of the books that were favorited or recommended by my favorite booktubers in 2018. I took a year off from reading. I've got a lot of catching up to do. So today I'm talking about Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. This is an unusual case because Sleeping Giants isn't a book that was released in 2018. It is actually released in 2016, but it didn't cross my path or it didn't appear on my radar until I started watching or going back to watch booktubers videos from 2018. And there were a lot of people that happened to read this book in 2018 that I follow, and they had nothing but great things to say about it. This is a science fiction novel, which isn't my go-to genre. Me and science fiction have an interesting relationship. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's complicated. It sounded very interesting. The premise, if you're unfamiliar with the book, is that a young girl in South Dakota falls into a hole one day while she's out riding her bike, and she actually lands in the palm of a giant metal hand. And nobody is sure what this hand is or represents or how it got there, etc. Because of that incident, the young girl, Rose, actually becomes a scientist, and she is obsessed with unearthing the history behind this hand. The book goes on, and they find more body parts that basically fuse together to form this giant, this metal giant. I really enjoyed Sleeping Giants. I'm not going to say that it's a 5-star read for me. It's not even my favorite science fiction novel, but this is a solid 4-star book as far as I'm concerned. And I'll get into the things that I really liked about it and the things that, kind of held it back for me in a bit. The first thing you need to know is that Sleeping Giants is the first book in a series of books. That said, I feel like the book actually is somewhat successful as a standalone novel if you do not read the epilogue. But then Sylvain Neuvel threw in this epilogue that totally changes the game. And if you can read the epilogue and not read the next book, congratulations, you deserve a medal. I will be reading the next book simply because of that epilogue. I don't, however, know when that will be. So that's my advice. If you're reading Sleeping Giants and you're halfway through it and you're like, if you haven't fallen in love with the book by halfway through, then don't read the epilogue. That's my opinion, my advice, but there you go. The other thing of note is that Sleeping Giants is written in the format of interviews and personal journal entries. So it's not going to read like a traditional novel, and you should know that going in as well. I think that both works for the book in some instances and kind of doesn't work or works against the story in other instances, but I'll get into that with what I liked and didn't like. My absolute favorite thing about Sleeping Giants is the story, the concept, and the way that Sylvain Neuvel actually manages to take relevant pieces of humanity's history, prominent belief systems. He weaves things that we know to be true, or at least we know to be widely accepted throughout our society as true. He weaves those things together to actually explain why the characters in this book have unearthed a gigantic metal figure. He reaches into historical events, he reaches into biblical events, he reaches into mythological stories, and I mean, that just won me over. The second that started to happen in the book, I was like, wow, I'm jealous. Like, I wish I could do that. I wish that I could read something, an excerpt from the Bible, for example, and turn it into this other story that has actually nothing to do with the traditional beliefs and assumptions about the Bible. Does that make sense? So that part I loved, and Sylvain Neuvel is obviously a very knowledgeable individual. So that was my absolute favorite part. My second favorite part of the book was the pacing, and the pacing is owed directly to the format. Like I said, it's told as if the characters are being interviewed, or as if the characters are writing personal journal entries. The book is mostly conversational, and that really helps with the pace, right? You're not being bogged down by things that aren't necessary to the book. I can honestly say that of almost 300 pages, there's nothing in this book that is in any way irrelevant. There's no details that I wish were omitted. I didn't skim anything. And that is, like I said, entirely due to the format that it's written in. On the other hand, that worked out great for the pace, but in actuality, Sleeping Giants is a beautiful story, and it's a story that left me wanting more. And I think I wanted more because of its formatting. I think that this is such a large story to simplify down into a conversational format. I mean, the things that are occurring and happening are so epic and outside of our reality that I kind of wanted enough detail and immersion that I could be both haunted by this giant and still in awe of it. And I didn't feel like it packed as much of a punch as it could have with some third person omniscient detail. The other thing that format does for the book, right, is it prevents or at least assists the author in not telegraphing their next twist. The book has 3 parts. Each part ends kind of on a revelation of sorts that can serve as a twist in the book. And a lot of times when you're reading a novel in a traditionally written format, you know, there are details and things like it's really difficult not to kind of hint around to where this is going. In a book with just conversation between 2 people in the moment, like in order to write in that format, you really have to erase everything that's going to happen later and focus on what 2 people do in the moment or what one person does in the moment. And it makes it easier for the author to avoid telegraphing their next move. So the things that did happen, I mean, there are some shocking things in this book, things that you definitely don't see coming, things that pack a punch because, you know, you are invested. That worked really well for the book. That said, I think the formatting does sell the story short a little bit because it is worthy. It is a concept worthy of some really elaborate writing. The only other thing I didn't really care for in the book is the direction that it took in the last quarter or so. This book starts out being very much about discovery and research and possibility, and turns kind of into this political strategy situation. It becomes less about this discovery and more about who's going to benefit from it or who's going to control it or, you know, those kinds of things. And so, you know, that it took a turn that was kind of like not up my alley. Not that it would turn anybody else off, but that was the only other thing holding me back from like really, really loving this book. If we could have kept the same optimistic, like unknown possibility feeling throughout, that would have been awesome. That said, the epilogue maybe reopens that door. Long story short, I definitely see why so many of the booktubers that I enjoy also enjoyed this book. It is a really great story, and it is one of the science fiction novels that, come to find out, works for me. I encourage you to check it out if it sounds like your kind of thing. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And like I said, the second book, Waking Gods, I do plan on reading it, but I don't at this particular point own it or anything. And we know how long it takes me to read books that I buy, so I don't know. Stay tuned. Hopefully I'll get to it sooner rather than later. In the meantime, that was my attempt to catch up to BookTube by reading Sleeping Giants. I have more catching up to do. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.